All right, here we are another day at Conversations with DJ. Today we have Cade Pierson here in the podcast. So welcome, Cade. Just please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm from Santa Barbara, California, so happy to make the drive down here. Started playing some pro pickleball this spring. Aside from that, I'm a head collegiate women's tennis coach at Westmont College in Santa Barbara, working on the side, and then really just kind of dove all into pursuing pickleball. So.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So Westmont is actually where you played tennis at, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, so I played on the program there. I got 5 years because of my COVID year. Studied kinesiology and psychology there, and then I was really blessed with the timing of my head coach leaving right after I graduated. So the college hired me right after to
awesome.
kind of fill those shoes.
No, that's amazing. And realistically speaking, so like obviously I get a lot of people that play tennis and there was like, oh, like I was so good at tennis, like if I did this and that, like realistically speaking, like how good were I, like what were some of your accolades in tennis? Like how good were you?
That's always a fun question.
Yeah.
Well, when I played at Westmont, we were in the NAIA, which is a separate entity from the NCAA. So I was a 3-time All-American in the NAIA. In our conference, it's called the GSAC conference. I was a 4-time, like all-conference member.
Nice.
So
that all sounds really good. I don't know what it is, but it all sounds really good.
I think at my highest, my singles ranking, I think I might have been top 5 in the country at one point. But again, it's different from the NCAA and kind of hard to compare in that regard. But
okay.
Yeah, prior to going there, I was only talking to like D1 schools, and then kind of like just by the way, I guess the universe and God works, I ended up at Westmont and played there, and it ended up being the best thing for me. But
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you were talking to some D1s, right? And then like you're originally from Santa Barbara. You said that. So like, do you think that had just kind of a lot to do with you going to college there as well?
Yes and no. So I kind of wanted to branch out. You know, I had some D1 offers and I was like, well, when would I ever, get the chance to just go experience somewhere new for 4 years, pretty much for free. So I was pretty set on like, okay, I want to make it work to go somewhere else. But I had eligibility issues having homeschooled at 2 different independent studies. One of them wasn't reviewed by the NCAA. And basically I wasn't NCAA eligible. So I couldn't accept a scholarship. I couldn't even walk on anywhere. So I was like, I can't play college tennis. And then the coach at Westmont at that time, which was pretty local, reached out to me and was like, hey, I saw you didn't sign. And, I told her, I'm like, I can't play. And she's like, well, we're NAIA. It's different. Like, if you're eligible, would you want to play for us? And I was like, well, yeah, like,
of course.
Of course.
Like, I do want to play.
And I went into it thinking like, okay, well, I wanted to go somewhere far away. I wanted to go somewhere different. Like, if I don't like it, I'll figure something else out. But I really fell in love with the campus, with the people, with the experience, with my teammates. And I think like at the end of the day, that's the place I was meant to be, even though it's not the place that I originally planned for myself. Yeah,
for sure. The one thing about, I don't fully know Santa Barbara, but I do know it's very nice. Right. So I feel like if you went out for like 4 years, and when this gets 5, right, if it happened and you went to like Ohio for like 5 years, like there's a pretty good chance that like a year and a half into, you might have been like, oh shit,
get me out.
Like get me out.
I want to go home.
Yeah. Like I have so many friends. I'm only like 24, right? So it's like I have so many friends like played college tennis, and then they'll go somewhere. They're like, oh, like this is great. Like I'm away from my parents and this, and like a year into it, they're like, oh no, like, dude, I need to go back to like San Diego or something.
Or the winter gets there and they're like, oh my gosh, I was not prepared.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. So you're not basically teaching tennis full time, right? And like super blessed to, basically your coach leaving at the right time, right? And also actively trying to pursue pro pickleball, right? So obviously, you're playing tennis translates really well to pickleball. But my question is, like, how do you find pickleball? How does that happen in Santa Barbara?
That's a great question. Well, there is a really like robust pickleball community in Santa Barbara. We call it Muni, like our kind of like local municipal courts.
I think I've been there before, actually.
Yeah, probably. If you've played in Santa Barbara, you've played there. So that's kind of like the hub of pickleball for us. And I got roped in. Well, I was a tennis snob before I played. I was like, I'd never played it and I never wanted to.
Yeah.
I thought it was dumb. I was like, it's for washed up tennis players. And sure enough, it's something called FCA. It's the Fellowship of Christian Athletes in our area. And they do a pickleball fundraiser.
Nice.
And I know the director of that. He reached out to me. He's like, hey, will you play with us in this event? Like, we need people. And I was like, I don't play pickleball. I don't like pickleball.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, I guess I'll do it. and like played in like the beginner bracket with like the ladies and like learned how to keep score. And I was like, okay, this is kind of fun. And then like swapped info with some people. They're like, will you start playing with us? And I was like,
yeah, like once a month.
Guess. I was like, yeah, it was the start of summer. And I was like, I mean, I'll have some free time. Like, okay. So that summer, I guess this past summer, I started like showing up at Muni and like meeting people to play with, and like got like a mixed partner who I'd like show up with and stuff. And then I guess one thing kind of led to another. And then I was slowly like, my weekends, I was like playing pickleball. And of course, like, so it's an older, like general community plays pickleball there. And everyone's like, well, I say like as a tennis player, you have a cheat code with pickleball. Like you automatically come in better than the average person. Yeah. But obviously there's a lot of things you have to develop. But from the beginning, there's all these people who are like, oh, you could go pro. Like, you know, you should do it. And I'm like, okay, like whatever. But yeah, kind of got roped in and then played like my first like local tournament.
A Muni?
No, so I went down to Thousand Oaks because we don't really have too many tournaments up there.
Yeah.
But I played with like a local partner. We're like, let's drive an hour, like big deal. We'll go play a tournament. And it was like a 4 or 5. That was like the highest division they had. Like we won it. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then from there, like I still didn't know like what a PPA was, like what APPs were. And then like slowly started playing like 5-0 PPA stuff like in the fall, and was like, oh, okay, like this is fun. And then in December met Dane Ginrich in the area, like in a clinic. And
pickleball coach.
I think that was the first time where I was like, okay, I could actually do this. Cause he was like, no, he's like, you can, you should. He's like, I know all these people tell you can. He's like, but I'm going to tell you for real, like you could do this. Yeah. And I think for me, like that really felt like an opportunity. I mean, with the world in COVID, like when college tennis ended for me, like I always kind of wanted to like attempt the pro scene. But at that time, like there was no pro scene. Right. And I also got my dream job. So pro tennis was kind of something that was like shelved and like tabled for me. So I think with the idea of like, oh, this is kind of like a replacement of that. And it's something new for me. So I guess kind of got roped in that way. And then he was like, well, he's like, you don't know anybody yet. Like you don't play with anybody good. He's like, so no one's going to want to be your partner. I was like, okay. So Dane actually played with me. My first like pro experience ever was the APP in Sacramento in March. So he like normally plays, you know, senior pro stuff. Yeah. And he's good though. Yeah. I mean, he wins good. Like everything senior pro stuff, but he's like, all right, I'm going to step down and play like pro stuff with you, with the young kids. And I was like, okay. And we had to play like pre-qualies. And he hasn't played a pre-quali in like 10 years. Yeah. So I was like, wow, he's a really good friend. So we made it through pre-qualies, and I think we lost in like the last round of qualies. And granted, like I still have no idea what I'm doing out there, like, but he was like really cool in supporting me. And then sure enough, like from there, got to partner with other people. Yeah. Got my next pro thing was Los Cab, where I ended up playing you in main draw. Yeah. And I only partnered with Drake because Dane like made that connection for me. So yeah, and then that was kind of the start from there.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, right? Because it's one of those things where I never want to be rude to anybody, right? But like you go play at a tennis court and like everyone's kind of like grumpy. Like if you go to a normal park, right? Like kind of like trying to draw some similar into like pickleball and tennis. You go to a park and like there's 4 people and they're grumpy and they're like waiting for you to leave because they want to play tennis and like, you know. But then you go to pickleball park and everyone's like, oh, hi, like my name is
will you come play with us?
Yeah, exactly. Like we need one more, like, and you're like, yeah, I'll play, like whatever, right? Yeah. Obviously, the better and better you get, like the more like kind of goes away, because then everything has to be a little more. There's got to be more purpose to it, right? Than just showing up and playing. But when you start, it's like the perfect thing to do because everyone's so friendly. Everyone wants you to be there with them. Everyone wants to talk to you. And kind of like you were saying, like if you're in Santa Barbara, for example, and you're like probably the youngest there anyways, and then you're like the fittest, like everybody wants to play with you. So it's like you kind of get this instant gratification like almost right away, which makes you want to come back too. And then on top of that, as you're like playing, because you have the tennis background, like every game you play, almost like every point you play, you're like, oh, like, okay, I got that. Like
oh, noted. I learned something. Yeah,
exactly. Like it might not happen right away, but like before you know it, like you're a week into it and you go from like a 4-0 to like a 5-0. And you're like, man, this is fun. Like, you know, I'm getting good. Like in my case, like I started in 2018, so I was like for sure the youngest. And I had basically like the entire Bobby Rick scene here in Encinitas was like, oh, like he's going to be the next big thing and whatever. I wasn't. That said, though, like it's just kind of it's fun to have people like that, like, you know, cheering for you because
Totally.
they're like, oh, like we believe in you. And that's kind of like what you got too from like Santa Barbara, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But one thing that I really want to touch on is like you're extremely fit. So how did that come about? Do you just love lifting weights? Like what's the deal there?
That's a really good question. I mean, I have like, I was gonna say had, but I have like present tense. I have a really strong mom. So I had like a really good example of like a strong woman, and that like strong is beautiful. So like from a young age, like I played sports, like soccer was my first love before tennis. And my mom was really good about like, oh, I want to try Kung Fu. Like I want to try boxing. And she would like do everything she could to make it happen for me. Or like even with my tennis, like she gave up so much like time and money to invest in that for me. And then obviously like she was fit herself too. So my mom, like I grew up running a lot with my mom. My mom was a runner. And then I think, she just kind of always promoted movement for me. Like if we were bored, it was like, well, let's go for a run or let's go for a walk. We always had dogs and like animals. So it was like, all right, we'll take the dog for a run. Like you're bored, go do that. And then started taking tennis really seriously when I was like 13. So right before high school, I kind of like dove all into that from soccer. And then as a cross trainer, started going to this like boxing and lifting gym. And I remember that was the first time that I like got to squat with like a bar and like learning about movement that way and really enjoyed that. So kind of always used like lifting and running as a cross trainer for tennis then. And then in high school, like kept pursuing that. And then when I got to college, I was like, well, what do I want to study? And I was like, well, I know I love human movement. I love the mind. And I knew I wanted to pursue coaching at one point. So I studied kinesiology and psychology. Kinesiology being the study of human movement. So I basically got to study working out in essence and the way the body moves. And then obviously had a great coach in college, strength and conditioning specialist who worked with us to kind of help me as an athlete, but I think kind of grew my knowledge in that. And in college, I really got into, aside from like normal like compound lifts, like squats, bench, everything else, I got into Olympic lifting. So I dated a guy who like I'd always wanted to learn how to clean, how to jerk, and he taught me. So like that was kind of fun. So like incorporated that into my training. So I guess I've always considered myself sort of like a hybrid athlete. I like compound lifts. I like explosive Olympic lifting. I like boxing. I like running. And then it's just something I've kind of always maintained since. I guess when I graduated, I mean, I was still coaching and playing tennis, but I wasn't playing at the capacity that I was when I was a collegiate athlete. So I feel like kind of like I expected, like my sport became like running and lifting and stuff. So I was following like a 5-day split. I was training a ton. And that was kind of what I did for the last few years with like tennis and everything. It was just like, and people ask me like, oh, well, do you track your macros? Like, are you meeting certain PRs? And it's like, my focus is on getting stronger, but I think generally I'm trying to live like in a way that makes me feel good and balanced. Because I'm like, if I'm tracking, like, I feel like I'm going to go down the rabbit hole of being like too obsessive. So for me, it's always been just because I enjoy movement and I feel most myself when I'm moving. And then obviously like pickleball has trickled in this last year. So my time in the gym has been a bit more intentional instead of just like, oh, this is fun. It's like, okay, well, this supports my movement and my performance in this way. So it's gotten a bit more direction. And then I just spend less time in the gym now. Like I don't go to the gym 5 days a week anymore. I go maybe 3 or whatever. So.
I have 2 questions.
Sure.
So one of them is like, who's fitter, you or your mom, both at their peak?
I think I've invested more into it than my mom did. So I'd say me.
Okay.
But my mom is somebody who like, she's like, she would, be like, oh, I'm not as fit as I once was now. But like she could like drop down and do like 100 burpees.
No way.
Right now. And she's like, she doesn't train as consistently as me. She rides horses for work. So she's a wrangler. So she's like, that's, a different type of fitness it requires. But, she's just the kind of person who, like, I would say doesn't have the same consistency that I've had just because her lifestyle is different than mine, but has just always been like a naturally fit person. And kind of, like I said, she just enjoys movement too. So I think me, but again, like I get to say like I'm a professional athlete. I'm playing a professional sport. Like I hope I'm fitter.
Yeah,
but
for sure. No, that's funny. Is there? And my second question is, and I'm gonna ask you later, because do you have like a before and after where you were like really skinny or something, and then you was like super fit, or was it always been a thing where like you're like always constantly fit?
I've always been pretty fit. So like I said, I grew up playing sports in my area. I think you guys do it down here. We did like we have junior lifeguards in the summer, and that like I lived for that. You run, you swim, you do push-ups in the sand.
Yeah.
So like I was always doing like active based stuff. Like growing up, I was young for my grade, so I was always like turning the grade everybody else already was the summer before class started. So I was always like the smallest. I was always like the shortest, the littlest. But I was always like the quickest. I feel like it like always pushed me to like be chasing after everybody else. And I feel like through, like I said, I grew up with like a strong mom, and like looking at professional sports, I was like, well, I was like, I want to be a pro tennis player. I want to look like a pro tennis player. So like, I feel like in high school, I was like, well, I was always skinny. Like I had a fast metabolism. Like I was always really fit, but like skinny fit. And I was like, I want to put on like muscle. Like I want to be bigger. And I just felt like, man, I couldn't do anything to gain weight. So like, I'm sure I have stuff. I feel like everyone's smaller in high school, right? But I have pictures where I was like, man, like I could eat a house and like I'm still the same weight.
Yeah, for sure.
And then like I think progressively in college is when I started to like bulk up more. Like I was always fit, but that's when people were like, oh, like instead of like you have a six pack, they're like, oh, you have delts, you know?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So like,
nice.
I think that's when I started to beef up, but I think that's just hormones too. And the age, and obviously just the frequency of training too.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's like when you're young, like it's so hard to put muscle, right? Like the one thing that I realized for me, like, cause I was 6'2" in middle school. So eighth grade, I was 6'2". There's a picture of me just like towering over everybody, basically. And then I stayed at that height, like basically until now, right? So I'm like still 6'2". But I was so skinny and I was so weak. Like I was like so weak for some reason. And then like as soon as I hit like maybe like 2021, I started getting like strength. Like now I'm my dad. So now I feel like it's like there's like this thing that I read, like when you become my dad, you actually get like something, like you gain weight, like muscle wise or something. Like it's like really weird.
They call it dad strength.
Dad strength.
You know, like
yeah,
there's
exactly.
dad calves, there's dad forearms. Like where did those come from?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because you know you were talking about hormones and stuff. Like I went from like really skinny and just kind of, and I'll show you a video later of me flexing. But at one point, like back in like March, I was 220 and I was like pretty beefed up.
Yeah.
And like 6'2", 220, that's a big guy, you know?
Yeah.
And it was just like really interesting just kind of seeing how like your body is like, oh, like, well, now you reach this point and like now you can just build a bunch of muscle. Or, you know, just especially for me because I was just always so weak. Like I used to look so tall and just so lanky. It's like, what's wrong with my body, man? Like, and my brother used to always beat me up because he was more like a 5'10", but like beefy.
Bill, yeah.
I was like, man, like this sucks. I can't like. And then now it's just like a total different story. But back to you, right? So obviously you're coaching full time, you're playing pickleball full time, so you have 2 full-time jobs, but kind of to some extent. So what are some of your goals for pickleball right now? Like what are you the most excited for?
Ooh, I like that question. Well, I guess for me, like as the summer is kind of wrapping up and we get into the fall when I'm like back on my academic calendar, I'm really trying to make the most out of like the summer that I can. So playing all of the events that I can travel to or that are local. Like I said, when I started playing pro stuff, like this spring really started focusing on just that. So stop playing 5-0 stuff because I'm like, it's just wasted money. So I'm like, okay, what pro stuff can I play? What can I make happen? So like, how can I commit to partners early and like go from there? So at the start of the summer, my goal was like, I'd like qualified. I hadn't won a main draw match. I was like, I want to win main draw matches, and then started doing that this summer. So I'm like, okay, I think it's a good goal to be like, well, like at what point in tournaments can you start like making a little bit of money back? Like if you make it far enough. I think PPAs, it's what, round of 16. APPs, it's like 9th place. I was like, I think that's a good goal to start working towards, like, you know, pushing myself there. And then I think that would help obviously with endorsements and sponsors to be able to say like, I have these results. So yeah, I think performance wise and on court, that's what I'd like to do with PPAs and APPs. I've been talking with different paddle brands. I'd love to commit to like one of those and represent a company that way. But yeah, I think from beyond that, I guess as a coach and as a player, I've always been very process focused. So like outcome goals, like big goals, but really focusing on like the process goals, the daily things that help you get towards like the end destination. So I think really like looking at what does that mean for my training. Obviously in Santa Barbara, it's not as big of a like, I guess, high level pickleball community as it is down here. So for me, I'm like really trying to plan my drilling sessions like a week out. Like, okay, I'm trying to drill 5 days a week. And if I have a rec game, I'm trying to make it really intentional with who I'm playing with. And then obviously trying to really plan my training around like the partners I have for tournaments. So coming up, I'm playing with a lefty, Tanner Tomasi, and I haven't played with a lefty since I was playing 5-0 stuff.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking like, okay, how can I really practice left side stuff to play well with him? And then also talking to him as my partner, like, hey, like my ego's totally aside. Like you've played against me in rec. What do you think I need to work on like before I play with you? So I guess just really being intentional with my training while I have kind of the flexibility of summer to do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Because when the school season comes, so in addition to like coaching my team and leading that, I teach PE classes for the college also.
Oh, nice.
So my schedule is a little more kind of gridlocked when the school year gets here.
Yeah.
So I have to be a bit more selective on which tournaments I'm playing, which ones I travel to and all of that.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm like, how can I get as much as I can out of the rest of the summer so I can plan my fall really well and commit to events then.
That's almost like another full-time job, just like planning itself. Like I'm not super organized. Like I'm not a terrible like organized person either, but like for me, like, you know, when I'm playing pro pickleball, it's like, you know, locking down partners, locking up like schedule, and like schedule changes like daily, man. Like it's like, oh my, like that was a tournament here, this one canceled, like whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to like book all your flights, hotels, Airbnb, you know, whatever you do in Airbnbs, like, and then on top of that, you're good. And then on top of that, also kind of like for tax purposes, right? Like you have to do like, okay, like write this off, like use only this card for a certain thing, or you use this other card for like this other stuff. And it's like, man, like this is a lot to do for one
keep
person.
Track of,
gotta keep track of everything. So yeah, like I was like, when you're like, obviously it goes for everything for the most part, but when you're an actual athlete, like you're basically working like 24/7, right? Like not only like all that stuff, but also like maybe like diet, you know, like you say you don't do macros, neither do I, but to some extent we try to eat a little healthier than we would if we weren't athletes, right? Like you eat that burger instead of, you know, protein style, you know, whatever it is, you know? So yeah, no, as far as your goals, I think it's great. And obviously, like to me, pickleball happens so fast that like, you know, like where do you see yourself in 5 years, like doesn't apply here, right? It's very much like next 2 months, next 3 months, like what does like, you know, 4 weeks at a time look like, you know? So I think you got it right. Like I think just kind of looking at, you know, what's next instead of like the big picture is like the best way to do it the best way to do it in pickleball, just because everything is like just moves so fast, you know?
Yeah.
That said, you were talking about paddles. So you're talking to a couple companies. Is there anything you're super excited for? Can you talk about that or?
Yeah. I mean, nothing crazy, nothing too insane. I think common for players at my level, like there's the Emerging Pros program by Selkirk. So I've been talking with them, which is really cool. I mean, they have some entry fee coverage, some stuff like that. Yeah. Prize matching. So talking with them, obviously I've trained with a few of their different paddles. So that's kind of like, I'm considering that. And then I'm also speaking with Carbon, which is the paddle I play with and have played with since I've started.
I love Garrett. Garrett's the man.
Yeah. And I love that they're a SoCal-based company. I love their product. Yeah. So talking with them and seeing if we can make that happen. And then currently I work with the pickleball shop in my area. I think I'm wearing their logo.
Oh, there we go.
The Santa Barbara Pickleball Shop. And they carry obviously a multitude of different paddles. But right now they support me. So they give me some gear. Paddle wise, they give me the paddles that I play with currently. Yeah. So I get my Carbons from them. And then Carlos is the owner there. He takes really good care of me. He's like, well, you could consider these brands too. So he's kind of opened up some avenues for me to explore and talk with other companies. And then he's the one who connected me with Carbon originally too.
Yeah, nice.
So yeah, kind of maintaining that relationship, but then hoping to also just work directly with a paddle company to get, you know, paddles, grips, represent the brand that way.
Yeah.
And then still work with my local shop, but kind of work with them in a different way. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, Carbon, so I was with Pro Kenix, and then like my next company was Carbon. So I was with Carbon for about a year and a half. And then like, unfortunately, like we had like the grid issues, and then I had like the DLM issues. And, you know, I try not to regret anything, but like, you know, when I look at like Carbon and stuff, like I love Gary. I love what they're doing. Thomas and Vivian are with Carbon, which I'm close with. And they're always like, it is one of those things where like unfortunately, like they always got like a little like step, like they kind of had like step backs, right, due to the grid and the D-lamps and stuff. But I also wonder like where the company would be if that never happened, right? Because they've been doing such a good job with like pushing the limits, but like not really. It's like it happened. I don't know. It's such an interesting, place to be. And I like Garrett so much. Like we've gotten coffee. Like we met up in San Clemente, and he's super nice, right? So I wish the absolute best for them. But I also would have loved to see just like where Carvin would be if nothing happened.
Yeah.
And also like where I would be with them if none of that happened either. Because like as a player, it's kind of tough too, right? It's like you're getting all these paddles, but you can't play with them. Yeah. And then you're like, well, like, so what do I do? So I had to make a tough decision there.
Yeah.
But I know they're all figured out now and they're doing good. So that's like the best way to go. And honestly, like huge shout out to them too, because you weren't playing back then, but when they got all these step backs, like they dealt with it like champions. Like they were like they were like giving people their money back, like sending them new paddles. The customer service was like unbelievable from Carvin.
Good to hear.
Yeah. So they've always been amazing towards like their pros and towards like the amateur people that are just just buying paddles because they like the product.
Yeah.
But yeah. So like my next question, obviously we talk a little about fitness. We talk about your pickleball. Would you? And obviously you said you don't really follow your macros, right, and stuff like that. But is there like some form of like dieting that you like follow? Do you do any form of like gluten free? Like, is there anything there, or just like whatever you want?
That's a great question. Typically now I'd say I eat pretty intuitively. I think generally speaking, like I grew up in a very healthy family. Like I said, I had a really good example in my mom and my parents. So I think generally when I'm home, I tend towards like healthier, whole, nourishing foods that make me feel good, that make me feel satiated, that make me feel like I can perform. So like I mean, I'm a big like chicken, salmon, like I eat a lot of protein, generally speaking. And I'll prep it. So I'll cook a bunch over the weekend, like for the week, because I don't have a ton of time. Yeah. So I'll prep like different protein for the week. And like, I'm a big rice person, like rice, pasta, grains, whatever. Like I'll prep those things so I have them ready. And then like, I'm a big vegetables person too. So like,
you got it all covered.
Anything.
You got protein, carbs. Yeah.
Exactly. And then like, I don't demonize any food group. I think every food is good, like in moderation. So like, like I think every meal can have dessert. Like I think dessert should have dessert. Like most people have a sweet tooth. Like I have sweet teeth. Like I love dessert, and that's something. Obviously, like I don't eat dessert every meal, but like when I'm traveling, when I'm out, like I'm gonna try a local ice cream place. Like that's fun. But when I'm home, like I think I am pretty good at moderation. So like I don't typically buy a ton of dessert to keep it at home. Yeah. Because then
it's too tough to handle. It's like it's there.
I'll still eat it in moderation if I have it, but I feel like I don't know. Like I save like eating fun stuff for when I'm doing fun things or when I'm out and about or when I'm with people. Because when I'm home, I'm like I want to eat stuff that I enjoy, but that's consistent. So yeah, a lot of protein, a lot of grains.
Are you a big smoothie girl?
I don't make smoothies as much, but I do love smoothies. I'll go through smoothie kicks.
Okay.
Where like
peanut butter or no peanut butter?
I like peanut butter. Yes. Big peanut butter girl. It depends though. So growing up, this could be like a whole like sidetrack conversation, but like I said, I came from a very healthy family, and for a majority of like my youth, my family, we ate like almost entirely raw food growing up. So like nothing cooked. So like everything was like, the idea behind it, the premise is that everything is whole, is more healthy, is more nutrient dense. So like when you cook foods, like obviously the idea behind pasteurization is that like you're getting rid of contaminants of bacteria, of whatever. Yeah. But the idea is that it's also a chemical change to the food. So like generally speaking, like some people have the idea that like it's losing its nourishment, like when you cook it, whatever. So like my parents were kind of like, well, eating raw is like the way to get the most nutrients out of our food. And that's what my parents ate for a long time and felt best eating. So that's how they raised me to eat. And like, there's still a lot of things like raw vegetables, raw honey, like whatever. But there's certain things that I'm like, like now that I'm an adult and I'm on my own, I'm like, I like my meat cooked unless it's sushi, like I think it tastes better. Yeah. I like it better that way.
Sounds like your dad's like the liver king or something.
Yeah, no, my mom's boyfriend growing up, he kind of like, I feel like he was the liver king, like before That's the liver king was a thing. So yeah, like I had really healthy examples. And I think for me, now in my own adulthood and my journey as an athlete and a person, I'm like, I think I eat pretty whole, pretty healthy, but like I like burgers, I like ice cream, like I'll eat those things, and I don't feel guilty about it either when I do. So I think I'm at a really good place with food, and I like that.
Yeah, no, that's a really good place to be, which, a lot of people kind of get into this, like, following their macros, so kind of we were talking about, like, not eating enough, or like,
Totally.
body dysmorphia or something like that, which is like not a great place to be, right? So hopefully people can get out of that. Like, the funny thing to me is, like, you're talking about this, and I could only imagine you're like, not that this happens or whatever, but like you go on a date with a guy, and then you guys go to a restaurant, and he's like, okay, like, how would you like your burger cooked? And it's like,
Rare.
Like, not at all. You're just like,
I want it mooing.
That's so funny.
Well, no, I think if anything, like, because I ate a lot of raw food, like I still like sushi and stuff, but like if I get a steak, I'm like, oh, I kind of want it medium well. Like I've had enough.
Interesting,
I've
yeah.
had enough pink meat. I'm like, I want it cooked. Like,
What about
I like
like
it
raw
crispy.
eggs?
So I had a lot of raw eggs growing up.
Okay.
Like I mean, I'll still shoot a raw egg right now. Like it's once you like, a lot of people like it grosses them out. I think once you're used to it, you can do it. So like I don't typically throw them in my smoothies or anything anymore. I don't typically shoot raw eggs, but like if I want to freak a friend out, like I'll be like, yeah, give me that egg. And like,
okay, shell or no
yeah.
shell?
Oh, you can eat the shell. Yeah.
That's insane.
Just
no, that's not good.
but yeah, now typically like when I have my eggs in the morning, I scramble them or over medium.
But it's also then you gotta clean.
That's true.
Yeah, so it's not as efficient.
That's true. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good point. Good point.
So I remember, obviously, the first time that I met you was at Los Cab where we played each other, right? And you said that was like your first main draw.
Yeah.
So how would you say your game has evolved so far from like, Los Cab time to like now, what, like 3-4 months ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. How would you?
I like that question. Well, like I said, that was my second pro experience. That was my first PPA pro experience. That was my first main draw experience. So before that, I'd only played 5-0 stuff.
Yeah.
And I'd only played like the pro pre-qualies and qualies with Dane Ginrich. So I was playing with Drake Palm in that tournament, and we made it. Yeah.
Love Drake.
We made it through, I think, 2 or 3 rounds. I think we made it through 3 rounds of qualies before we played you, and I don't remember your partner's name there.
Allie.
Okay. Yeah. So I feel like I was still just kind of like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I was like, a lot of mixed I'd played until that point was on the left side because my amateur partner was a lefty.
Yeah.
So I was still adjusting to like pro mix being on the right side.
Yeah.
And I feel like it was even recently like for a while, I didn't really know like what a reset was. I was just like, it's when you like hit kind of like a weirder ground stroke to get under the ball. Like I feel like it was not too long before that I learned like, okay, this is actually how you like properly like reset, which is obviously huge in mixed. So I feel like I came into that like really being like, Drake, like pop off. Like
you do you, bro.
You do your thing.
Yeah.
And like I even like I've looked at film from that match, and I'm like standing so far back because I'm like, my job is just to reset, like maybe dink. If something goes by Drake, I just want to try and like get it back.
Yeah.
So I was obviously giving him space to be big in the middle, but also standing like super far back. And so I think since then, I took like the month of May to play as many pro events as I could. I got like a month off in the summer. So I went from Cincinnati to Atlanta to New York to Dallas to Sacramento.
Both PPS and APPs, huh?
Yes. So playing everything. And in that time, I played with like several other mixed partners. So after Drake, I've played a few times with Kyle Kazuda, which has been really fun, really helpful, and played with some other guys. But I think have grown a lot in those different partnerships and learning and just experience at that level. So I think when I look back on like my first pro experience, I think I know more clearly what my role is in mixed and like what I'm trying to do like as a right side player with my partner. I think I've also just gotten stronger, obviously, like shot development wise. Like I said, I've spent a lot more time knowing actually how to reset and like what I'm trying to do with it. Obviously have developed like a lot stronger cross court dinking patterns and dinking behind the guy. And I think just like the way that I work forward, the way that I move around my partner, Kyle Kazuda, playing with him, I think he's been a really big help, like playing with him, because he's obviously very knowledgeable, and we've created a friendship where when I play with him, I'm like, okay, like be honest with me, like what should I do differently? Like what do you want me to do? And like he can be really candid and be like, you're backing up again or stuff like that. So I think he's really helped me developmentally, like as a mixed partner and talking through with him. And I think him and Drake are obviously similar in some ways and differently, but I played again with Drake more recently, and I hadn't played with him since I played against you in Los Cab. And it was really fun for me, like a few months apart, to be like, oh, okay, I see the ways that I've grown compared to the last time I was on the court
Yeah.
with Drake, and like, and how I felt even just confidence wise and like belonging, how I, felt, doing my role and stuff. So I don't know. I think coming from like tennis to pickleball, you're like, I can hit the crap out of everything and it goes in. So I think like naturally coming to pickleball, I was like super aggressive, and I think I've kind of toned that back. Like I think at the pro level, like you're not going to get free balls off of drives, obviously. Like you have to be able to drop well at people's feet. You have to be able to reset and have the patience to develop a point. And I think like that's obvious and intuitive, but I think like, getting my ass handed to me a few times has really taught me how to do that better. And it's something I think I'm still working on. But I think like just my development in transition and at the kitchen line and interaction with my partner and the way I see and like feel the court and my opponent, I think has developed a lot since that match. So
yeah. Well, and I think you're able to grow so quick too because of actually playing tournaments, right? Like you would have, I could bet you like all the money in the world that if you just stayed in Santa Barbara playing like a muni, like it would not, like the progress would not just be as quick.
Totally.
Right? So like that's kind of like the best advice too that I give like people, even if I'm like just teaching a lesson or two. It's like, well, how do I get better quicker? It's like, well, you want to go to a tournament, you want to win the first round, whatever it is, and then like when you lose, you're gonna know why you lost.
Yeah.
So then you come back to me, and then you tell me what you did, how you lost, and then we'll work on that, right? But if you always, whether you're a pro, whether you're me, whether you're a 4-0 at a park, like you're never gonna really grow by playing the same 4, 8, like 12 people that are your friends every single Tuesday night, right? So just kind of getting like out of the comfort zone, right? And being able to maybe go like play with a different group. Maybe
totally.
They could be 4-0s, you could be a 4-5, and like just being there, like not knowing what they're doing is gonna get you better, right?
Totally.
If you're a 4-5 and you could somehow play a 5-0, like that's great too, right?
Yeah.
So just kind of getting different looks at all times is gonna put you in those uncomfortable positions. They're gonna allow you to grow.
Totally.
That's kind of how I see it. Yeah, but very cool. So we, obviously we covered pickleball. We covered how you started. We covered obviously food. You're so fit. It's like amazing. I love it. But now, like obviously, you're gonna keep playing. So is there anyone that you're really looking forward to playing with? Who are some of your like, I would love to play with this person? Oh,
I love that question. I feel like I feel like I've gotten this question and haven't thought too big with it. Maybe I could think bigger. I mean, like I said, I think my favorite partners I've had so far are Kyle Kazuda and Drake Palm. I've loved playing with both of them. I would always play with either of them again. I'm really excited to play with Tanner Tomasi, the lefty coming up. Him and Kyle had a really good run at the APP Newport. It was their first time playing together. They got to the bronze match.
Yeah, I did see that actually.
So I played with him in some rec games and excited to play with him and excited to play left side and see how it goes.
Are you naturally more of a left side girl or like a right side girl?
I feel like I've really become a right side girl because that's all I've played in pro stuff so far. Yeah. So I'm really excited to be tested on that side because that's originally like
where you started.
I really only played left side. So I'm excited to see where I'm at with that. And if we perform well together, even if we get smoked, like I'd love to play with Tanner or play with other lefties and kind of see what's there. I've played with lefties and women's, but that's obviously different.
Yeah.
Than playing,
a little different.
than playing with a lefty guy mixed.
A little different.
So I guess we'll see. But yeah, I mean, I'd tell Kyle and Drake, I'm like, I'll always play with you guys. I think on the women's side, like, I feel like there's a lot of options, but I feel like people do get their general partners. It's that balance of like, oh, I'd love to find somebody and grow with them. Like, especially in SoCal, like I'm willing to drive a bit if there's a good partner. But I think also that kind of like, kid in a candy shop idea too of like, oh, well, maybe I'd match up well with this person or this person or this person. For sure. So I don't know. I think being a college tennis coach, one thing I've learned is that like there's partnerships that surprise you. Like there's partnerships that should make sense, should jive, and they just don't. And there's some that you're like, I don't know why it works, but it does.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think for me, just really keeping my options open. Like I'd love the opportunity to play with somebody a lot better than me or somebody who's ranked higher than me, like regardless of who they are. I'd love the opportunity to meet a solid girl or guy and grow with them and invest in that partnership. So I think I'm just really
open to all.
Open, yeah. I'm not very picky. I think I make the most with what opportunities I have. So,
did you sign up to play MLP Australia?
I didn't. So I didn't know like what that was until after it had happened. But yeah, I met. So I played Pickletopia recently, which was like a local thing by iPickle. They had like pro divisions. And I already knew Roman, but his girlfriend Jasmine, they're both playing and they were fundraising. So it was fun to talk to them about, they're like, oh yeah, you sign up for the draft. And then we got drafted. And I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm like, that would be a fun thing to know for the future. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say for you, it'd be just the goal. Like, I guess you could go to Australia, right? But I feel like if you're doing the right amount of training, if you're getting around the right people, right? Like ideally you go straight into Challenger. That's kind of like where I see you doing it mostly. First of all, I just see like huge upside. Also, like I don't know because I haven't seen it. I've seen clips of you playing singles too. So you're obviously extremely mobile. So, you know, you move really well. You hit really good ground strokes coming from tennis and singles. And I don't know how much it matters in Australia because I don't know what the level is like there. I don't know how they are. But here in the U.S. is obviously extremely valuable, right?
Yeah.
Like you see, especially Premier, like they're choosing players based on like how good are they at singles.
Yeah.
Like if I can have like Ben win 2 matches, we go straight to singles. It doesn't even matter anymore, right? So then you try to just draft around like a lot of the singles players. But I think in Challenger, actually, you know, because I've been in Challenger for the past 2 seasons, if they're very focused on actually doubles more than they are in singles. Like you have people, I don't want to name any names because I don't want to be a dick, but you have people there that like barely play any singles. And I'm not great at singles, but my doubles is obviously, you know, pretty good when I'm healthy. So that said, like I see you being just a really good, valuable asset to some, you know, asset, whatever, in Challenger, just because you'll be able to like grow and do both simultaneously at a very high level. So I see that kind of cool too.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But time's running up. I'm gonna thank my sponsors real quick. Thank you, Stack, Head, You Drippin', Hezekor. Use DJ Young code at the end, and we actually still do have some time. Sorry. But if there's anything you want to talk about, bring up, any questions, thank anybody, like go ahead. Now is your time.
Ooh, okay. Well, yeah, I guess grateful for the people who have supported me so far. I brought up the shop. Carlos at the Santa Barbara Pickleball Shop has been an awesome support for me. I also work with a company called Ivan Bar. Speaking of
I saw that
foods.
actually.
Yeah, so they're local to Santa Barbara. They're like a food and nut bar. The peanut butter one is my favorite. I'll give you one.
Perfect.
Later.
Peanut butter one.
You'll like it. The peanut butter one. But they give me bars, and that's my I eat way too many of them when I'm on the road. I'm like
doesn't mess up your stomach.
Yeah, no, it's good for me. I'll be like in the airport at 2 a.m. I'm like, I need a snack. Ivan Bar.
Perfect.
So that saves me. But yeah, I'm grateful for the companies that I work with.
Yeah.
So thanks to them.
Big shout out to them, and thank you so much for coming, and can't wait to get some practice with you later
Yeah,
on.
thank you for having me. Excited to hit the courts.